How do you spot a genuinely good-hearted person? If there was one test to figure that out, what would that be? And before getting to that, let me state this universal truth first, that each and every one of us at our core is extremely peaceful, joyful, and loving. That's our true essence. But as we grow up through our conditioning and our life experiences and many other factors, we develop these layers of ego around that true essence that kind of dilute this true essence into an imperfect version of ourselves. So, if you were to consider the true essence as a straight line, then through our life we kind of take these detours around that true essence, that straight line. So sometimes coming closer when we are peaceful and loving, and sometimes when our ego is very powerful, going away from that. So if you were to measure how close or far you are from that true essence, what test would you apply? And it's very easy. The more you're able to see the good in others, the closer you are to that true essence. The closer you are to being that genuinely good-hearted person. So somebody who would top the scale would be someone who can only see the goodness in other people, somebody who cannot see flaws in other people. And that's because what you see outside of you, what you see in others, is what you carry inside of you. So if you're seeing somebody's flaws, that's actually your own judgment about the parts of you that need to be healed or corrected. This is deep. Let's take a moment to soak that in. So when you point at somebody's flaws, you're actually comparing yourself against that person. So you're using that person as a measure to prove how good you are. So it's your ego's mechanism to feel good about itself. So basically, you are here at level 0 and you are looking at somebody below you to feel that you are higher up. You are still there. You haven't done anything to raise your worth or raise your goodness. You are right there, but just because you are looking at somebody below you, your ego is getting that false sense of being high up, and it's self-created. That person may or may not be at that level. It's just everything is in your mind. So it's your ego is kind of trying to create that false sense of pride to feel good about itself. You'll often notice that people try to find the flaws in people who they secretly believe are better than them at something. So it could be anything. It could be their looks, their lifestyle, their relationships, their money that they have, their skills and talent, their recognition in the society. It could be anything. But secretly, when somebody is jealous of somebody else, then their ego cannot accept that. It resists that. And so it tries to compensate for it by trying to find something about that person that is less than them. And that's how they start pointing flaws of other people. You'll see that for a lot of people, it's easier to be kind to somebody who's unfortunate compared to them. Because in that case, their ego is not threatened. It feels good about itself by helping somebody that's below them. Now, I'm not saying that it's not good to help others, but just that if somebody being grateful to you for helping them, it kind of feeds the ego. If that's what is the driving factor for helping them, and then you feel good about yourself. But what happens if that person starts rising up in rank and comes closer to you? That's when things start changing. And when they start going above you, that's when you start noticing things that you never noticed before. You start noticing the flaws, because that's when your ego feels threatened. That's how the ego works. it constantly makes you compare yourself against somebody else. So it's using that person as a measure to decide your worth. And do we really need that? Do we really need to create any hierarchy? No, you don't. You can just appreciate somebody for who they are, and you can admire yourself for who you are. It's very simple. And when you drop that hierarchy, when you drop that comparison, you can actually see somebody else for the goodness that they have. You can actually truly appreciate what they have without feeling threatened. And that is why the more you're able to see good in others, that means that you are less in the grip of the ego and closer to your true essence. And if you dig even deeper, you might find that in some scenarios, when you judge the wrongdoings of somebody, you're actually judging yourself for the tendencies you might have to do those exact same wrongdoings. And this is very deep, so I'll let you have your own moment contemplating that. If I could wish for one thing in this life, I would ask to be such a person who could only see the goodness in others. Now, some of you might argue that if you only see the good in others, if you ignore their flaws, then the bad ones will try to take advantage of you. You can't be so naive in this world, right? But let me tell you, if you see the good in others, others are driven to see the good in you. It's like when you see the good in the world, you attract the goodness from the world towards you. Let me tell you an incident about this person. Let's call her Z. Almost everybody I know thought of her as somebody who's too much in her head, a big show off, very bitchy, very mean, egoistic kind of a person. A lot of people resented her, a lot of people gossiped about her, a lot of people laughed at her. And one day I was casually talking to my mother-in-law, and somehow this topic of Z came along, and I was expecting her to say something on the same lines that other people talk about her. But to my surprise, my mother-in-law says, "Oh, Z, isn't she so confident and smart and such a go-getter?" And she had this twinkle in her eyes, and she was genuinely appreciating somebody. And I had never heard that from anybody else. I was in awe. I wasn't thinking about Z anymore. I was just amazed at the purity of my mother-in-law's heart. And no, I wasn't thinking that she's so naive. In fact, I know that she's a very intelligent and strong lady. She has extremely great leadership qualities that I know of. All of the people around her like her, and she's very popular in the community. And all of that just made sense in that moment. Because in that moment, she proved to me that regardless of what the layers of the ego a person has put on, she's able to still see the goodness in other people. She was able to see through those layers of ego into her soul. She was able to see the good parts of her. And just imagine how much negativity Z must be getting from other people. And she must be thinking that nobody ever gets me, right? And she's getting all irritated and more bitchy because of that. But then somebody like my mother-in-law comes along and genuinely appreciates the goodness in her, and Z would think, okay, finally here's somebody who gets me. Here's somebody who can see me for who I am. And naturally, she's going to have that soft corner towards my mother-in-law. So in the similar scenario, she would treat everybody else differently and my mother-in-law a little more special. So that's how, by seeing goodness in others, you attract the good towards you. Now know that this is not an act of buttering someone else up. that act of buttering is a selfish act, because you're knowingly creating this hierarchy where you're putting someone else above you to feed their ego. So because their ego gets a sense of being above you, their ego is not threatened, and they are probably motivated to help you. So it's a selfish act of getting what you want by doing this deliberate hierarchy. This is not that. You are not praising somebody just because of the sake of it. You're actually seeing through the layers of the ego into their soul and genuinely admiring something that's above them. So in that case, you are at their level of hierarchy. You're not below them, you're not above them, you're at their level and trying to appreciate them for who they are. So it comes across, it gives off that genuine energy that other person senses and reacts accordingly. Another beautiful thing that happens when you are able to see the good in others is that it allows you to be more compassionate towards that person. So even if somebody wrongs you, you're able to forgive them easily because you can also see the good side of them. Or perhaps you're not even bothered much by what they did or said because you might try to understand why they did that. See how the parents are able to look past the mistakes and tantrum of their own children compared to somebody else's. It's the same tantrum, but a parent would be able to look past it and understand why the child is doing that compared to somebody who's just being annoyed by the tantrum of the same child, right? So it's just because they have a more loving attitude towards them. Your child and somebody else's child, same act, same tantrum, but you see both of them differently. Now, if you could take that same attitude, same loving filter a little further away to include more people, really let your heart expand, then you will be able to look past their ego layers into their soul, to their true essence. And they will be able to see your true essence because obviously the layers of ego that you have are very thin. So the light within you shines really bright for everybody to notice that. And that's how you're able to connect with everybody very easily. Now, don't beat yourself up if you do see the flaws in others. It's very natural, it's very human to do that. But we can consciously try to change this pattern. So if you do catch yourself pointing at somebody's flaws or gossiping about them, then just that moment of awareness is very important, because in that you can choose to change your thought. You can say, okay, I'm getting all these negative thoughts. Why don't I try to look for something that is good in that person? And it may be easy in some cases with some people, and it may be extremely difficult in some other cases, but at least you can try to make an effort. And the more effort you make, the more consistent effort you make, you'll notice that it comes naturally, more effortlessly to you. Just try to look at the other person through the layers of their ego, just considering that all that imperfection is on the surface, and at their true essence, they're still very pure, loving, and joyful. Just try to get this blank slate without any history or bias against them, and look at them with curiosity, with genuine filter of love, and see if you can find anything good in them. It does require an effort, but at least we can try, right? And if you try to practice this consistently, it will transform your life. You will become a magnet that attracts all the goodness in the universe. By seeing the good in others, you're able to attract all this goodness in the universe, and that confirms your own belief that the others are good. You see the world as a better place. You create your own reality. And that's how the law of attraction works. doesn't it?